Good evening to you all. I am K.A. Dhananjay from India, and today I will be presenting on the topic Age of the New Empire, China and Expansionism in the 21st Century. As the title suggests, I will be looking at China's expansionism in the modern era and the issues and problems associated with it. However, the key questions are whether expansionism as a tactical tool is relevant in the current era or is it a thing of the past, whether China's expansionism is its novel way of showcasing development, and what are the main drawbacks of China's expansionist tendencies. Now let us look at the presentation. The brief contents of this presentation would be as follows. First, I will be looking at the evolutionary and historical background behind China's expansionist tendencies. Following that, I will be looking at the 21st century expansionism that China has been employing, whether it is development or expansionism. And I will also be looking at the effects and drawbacks of this expansionism. And finally, I will conclude and suggest the way forward. Coming to the background of this research, we need to understand that history plays an important role in China's 21st century expansionism. Why? Because through this research I have found out that whether it's ancient China or in medieval China or in the modern era, China was either a party to expansionism or was subject to expansionism. Now let us see how that happened. Importantly, we need to note that in the period of Mongols, Minks and the Qing dynasty, through expeditions like 10 Great Campaigns and Ming voyages, these were all ambitious projects of or ambitious expansionist projects of those rulers and dynasties, and they tried to conquer distant lands and bring distant regions under their might, and eventually these regions became the tributary state of whether the Mongols or Mings or the Qing dynasties. But when it comes to modern China, there is a difference there. Although in modern China there were a certain amount of expansionism territorially by the Qing dynasty, that is especially they conquered Mongolia and parts of modern day Korea. But this was a period that saw, or where we could tell that this was the period where China itself was subject to expansionism from colonial forces. We all know that during the modern era, it was an era filled with two world wars. It was an era filled with colonialism, importantly. And European colonial powers had already increased their footprint in Asia, and they also had keen checkpoints in warehouses and ports in strategic locations, even in China, like Shanghai, Tianjin, and Hong Kong. And it was again with permission of the Qing dynasty then, but again it was subject to expansionism of some sort or colonialism. And eventually, when Republic of China took over the reins, then again there was external aggression from Soviet Union and Imperial Japan. They occupied Manchuria, they occupied East Turkestan, and there are a lot of territorial claims that were put forth by other countries as well. So again, this was the period that saw external aggression in China. So expansionism came to China in this period. But whereas in communist China, especially post 1949, it was an assertive approach that brought China to this extent in expansionism, or its policies that subjected to expansionism. It liberated Xinjiang and Tibet. Then it had a war with India in 1962, and it also had territorial claims in the South China Sea, which till date there is a dispute that is still lingering there. So historically, we could see that China was an expansionist state, or it was subject to expansionism, and later post 1949 we saw resurgence of Chinese expansionism. That is what is keeping the ball rolling in the 21st century. Now if you see this picture, this is a picture that is depicting the expansionism or a territorial expansionism in two eras or two regimes, mainly the Qing dynasty, and on the right you could see the Republic of China as in within enclosed within the boundaries of modern China. Coming to the 21st century, it is very much important for all of us to understand that in the 21st century, it is the age of globalization. This is the age of technologies, and China altered its expansionism in the modern fold. Ranging from debt trap to wolf warrior diplomacy, China's strategy shifted to an aggressive paradigm that solved both political and economical interests of Beijing. Now, how did that happen? Then there comes the dichotomous debate between expansionism or development. In the 21st century, we need to know that expansionism and development are at extreme ends. Whether the former is a policy with allusions of conquest and states of imperialism, the latter purely depends on economic vibrancy and growth. Among the two, development is preferred because of positive paradigms such as self-reliance and steered economic growth that is trumps the neo-colonial aspects of expansionist exploits. Yet in the current context, it is important to understand that expansionism is not an anachronism, especially with respect to Asia. In Asia, China, as part of its policy imperative, adopts both expansionism and development side by side. So that is this euphemism that China has been resorting to. It is construing expansionism as development and development as expansionism. So there's a confusion there, whether it is expansionism that China is trying to perpetrate or whether it is development that China is trying to perpetrate. But let us see how this really works. We need to understand that China expansionism works on two main aspects. One is strategic investments through debt trap diplomacy, and the other one is pure hard power or showcase of armed intimidation. We know that through debt trap funding, Beijing has expanded its power trail from the Caucasus to the Pacific. And as a part of China's investment policy, the Belt and Road Initiative, a $1 trillion project, is the biggest contributor to China's strategic agenda in the region. So this has clearly contributed to that aspect of both development and expansionism, because China's relevance is increasing, its impact is increasing, and these countries are now under the might of China's political and economic decisions. However, China has been resorting to hardcore military strategies like salami slice policy. Now, what is salami slicing? Salami slicing means small stealth military operations which accumulate over time in a large territorial gain. So small actions lead to a large outcome. That is, to put it simply or in a simple words. Here, through increasing border infrastructures, it is again intimidating states like India, to keep vigil of their borders, because that is what it's exactly doing. The recent border clashes between India and China is the main source of it is again salami slicing of China, and the same has been replicated even in the string of pearls controversy or issue, because many scholars believe it is another manifestation of the salami slicing strategy itself, because it's modern or economic slicing basically. Now, for China to rise as an hegemon, it needs to shift the focus from the historically developed hegemon, that is west, to the east. So for that, it is trying to change the geopolitical order per se. Now, how is it doing that? It is doing by creating new institutions like Shanghai Cooperation Organization and Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, so that now China will be the main lender, or China will be the main cooperator, or might be the main partner in development, which will be a country will have a say in almost everything that's going across the world. So it is trying to rise to the occasion, and for that it is trying to reform institutions by changing the institutions and spearheading to create more institutions like these. So through that, again, it is trying to give a positive approach here, but will that work? Again, that's a question, because these institutions were created over the course of last especially Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, or the BRI for that matter, were created in last 10 years or so. But we need to understand that China is changing its strategy here. That's what I was about to say. That expansionism has been changed and altered in the modern context, and it has been changed to accommodate modern interests, modern questions and aspects. So three elements to note here. One is the strategic investment part, the other is the hard power part, and third is the change in institutions or reviving institutions part. So these are the key elements that China has been doing to expand in the 21st century, and whether it's expansionism or development, how it should be construed is again a big question. But let us see, based on the effects and drawbacks of this whatever expansionism or development that China has been considering over the years. This is a bird's eye view of the projects, the marquee projects like BRI or the Maritime Silk Road or the Silk Road Economic Belt that China has been promoting and bankrolling over the years. Coming to effects and drawbacks, this is the real test to China's claim of whether it is expansionism or development, or whether it is both. There are three aspects to note. One is human rights, another sovereignty, and another is security. Human rights, we all know that recent examples, what is happening in Hong Kong, or what is happening to Uyghur Muslims in Xinjiang, or the cultural genocide that is happening in Inner Mongolia as well as in Tibet. All these examples clearly state to us one thing, or brings to us one particular aspect, that is human rights is below par at China, and the Chinese regime does not respect human rights. It disregards human rights. So the product of this expansionism is basically people suffer and their feelings and liberty is at stake there. Talking about sovereignty, through China's debt trap funding, many developing states are falling prey to this trap or this vicious circle. And due to that, as a result of this, their state organs and institutions are being compromised, and that again leads to the whole aspect of sovereignty or independence per se undermined. Coming to security, we know that China in recent times has been a warmonger, or to put it, always ready to fight. Now, when it is ready to fight, it is obviously, it has its own territorial ambitions, as well as, it is trying to create a geopolitical shift, as I said earlier in the previous section. So, in this project, it is inciting others as well. So, there is a geopolitical battle that is still there in the Indo-Pacific theater, especially with India, US and Japan trying to counter China with their own military techniques and strategy. So again, there is a brink of a major conflict in the Indo-Pacific region, adding an aura of war into the picture, and that is detrimental to international security as a whole. So now we understand that human rights, sovereignty and security is at stake when China's expansion. In conclusion, I believe that China needs to tone down and change its aggressive approach, especially during the pandemic, because global animosity mounts on them, because whether it is China behind the outbreak in the first place. Important to note that expansionism per se is not the new normal, as it does not value people or their opinions in an era where opinions matter everywhere. So for China to rise as a dominant power, the crude way of expansionism is never going to work. Only through consensus and healthy diplomatic relationship, China could rise in the 21st century. In conclusion, I would like to end this presentation by referring to Henry Kissinger, who says, almost all empires were created by force, but none can be sustained by it without translating force into obligation. Empires persist if repression gives way to consensus. The underlying lesson here is, unless the Westphalian thought of crude power is replaced by commitment and responsibility coupled with inclusion, countries like China are bound to face the antithesis of expansionism, an antithesis of their existence per se. Note, I conclude my presentation. Before I part, I sincerely thank ICRP for providing me this opportunity to speak at this ESCO Conference 2020. If you have any queries or questions, feel free to contact me via mail. The mail ID is given below. Thank you for listening to me throughout this presentation.